Look, I get it. You're a busy dweeb. You have a job, maybe, some wives and kids. You've got bills to do, chores to run, errands to pay, and most importantly, video games to play. And there's not enough time in the day to do all that stuff, let alone watch every TechDweeb video to find out about all the fun retro doodads that are out there. So what do? Should you just leave it all behind and go live in a cabin in the woods like that Walden guy? Or should you watch a bunch of TechDweeb reviews in a row that are only 1 minute long to save you time and let you finally get your life back on track? I mean, pick whichever you want. You do you. I'm still gonna do the short reviews though, 20 of them. These reviews are in no particular order. Some of these things I've shown before, some of them are new, but all of them are worth your time and hard-earned root beer money. This isn't every doodad out there, just 20 of them that I find good or interesting or will just be fun to talk about. Most of these retro doodads were sent to me by Lit NXT, but some of them I got from the manufacturers and some of them I bought myself. I'll try to find links to all of this stuff below if you want to pick any of it up. And since I reviewed most of these, I'll also have links to all my video reviews down there too. There's gonna be a lot of links down there, I guess. Man, this video is gonna be a freaking ton of work to make. I spoil you. You know that? Let's start off with a bang. This is the RG35XX Plus, a handheld that I crowned as the best handheld. Why is it the best handheld? Oh, because I say it is, that's why. This thing is a crowd pleaser. I think anyone could benefit from having a little BIZZAZZLE in their life. That's what I call the 35XX Plus, the BIZZAZZLE. Awesome name, I know. It's just a wonderful all-around doodad. It's got a great build quality, solid controls, great screen, great sound, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and video out. It's got a decent stock operating system and can make use of many amazing custom operating systems, including Newly, which is my personal favorite. It plays everything up to PS1, Dreamcast, Nintendo DS, and PSP, and it's in the classic Game Boy shape for extra nostalgia points. This is just an amazing one-size-fits-all device that is great out of the box and gets even greater with time as you learn all the little tricks it can do. The ODIN 2 Portal is the new hotness. This thing just came out and it's already causing waves in the retro handheld world. Not literally. People aren't actually throwing their ODIN 2 portals into lakes to make waves or anything. Actually, I can't say that for sure. Probably not though. The ODIN 2 was a groundbreaking device, and the Portal is everything that made the ODIN 2 amazing. A huge battery, great controls and ergonomics, and a powerful processor that can run basically anything that's possible on Android. You get all that, but the Portal now has a beautiful, huge, high refresh rate 1080p OLED screen. This thing is so crazy good, and it can do so much, and what's crazy is that it's actually a reasonable price. I mean, it's not cheap, but considering what you get and how well everything runs and plays, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better value. Just don't even try to put it in your pocket though. That's not gonna go well. You know what can go in your pocket though? Seriously, I'm asking you. I have some pockets and I just don't know what to put in them. Incidentally, let's take a look at the RG Nano. This is the smallest little Game Boy that you can get. Actually, that's a lie. There's some weird tiny little Game Boy things out there. But this is the smallest you can get that is actually playable. Believe it or don't, this thing can play everything up to and including PS1. If you had told little TechDweeb that someday he'd have a tiny little Game Boy that can play PlayStation games, he'd have called you a liar and ran away crying. I cried a lot when I was a kid. Still do, actually. The craziest thing about the Nano is the size, obviously. It's no bigger than a rare and expensive magic card folded into the shape of an RG Nano. You can literally use this thing as a keychain or a necklace. And if wearing a Game Boy as jewelry doesn't appeal to you, there's obviously something wrong with you. Next up, we have one of my current favorite handhelds. I use this thing all the freaking time. I love it to bits. It's the RG35XX SP, which I call the FLIPZIZZLE. As you can see, it's more or less stolen the form factor of the GBA SP. However, this thing can do a lot more than GBA. It can handle everything up to PS1 and N64 and Dreamcast and Nintendo DS and PSP. It has a good stock system, and just like the BIZZAZZLE, the FLIPZIZZLE is compatible with Newly, my favorite handheld system. It has great controls, clicky D-pad and buttons, so if you're not into that, don't go for this. I like the clicky personally. Great screen, all that good stuff. But what makes the FLIPZIZZLE special is that it flips. Flip. No, not that kind of flip. The screen. The screen flips down. So it becomes small and pocket friendly, and the screen is protected when it's shut. It's just a versatile little emulation device that looks like a little mini laptop flippy Game Boy thing with enough power to handle a ton of stuff. And the fact that it captures the nostalgia of the original Game Boy just tickles me in my nerd spot. And don't ask where the nerd spot is. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. And I love to show off this one because it's so weird and cool. It's like a little mini version of the FLIPZIZZLE, and it's kind of baffling that this thing even exists. That's why I love it. I love that there are companies out there doing this sort of thing. It's called the FUNKEY. And to be clear, this is not going to be for everyone. It's a very, very small doodad with a teeny tiny screen, but there are some things about it that make it a legit fun retro doodad to actually play games on. First is the fact that it has autosave and auto load function built in, which means that you can open up the thing and it boots right into your game. The screen is small, but it's big enough to see the games because most retro games were actually pretty simple with big clear text, especially Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, which are the ideal games for this thing. And it's hands down the smallest and lightest handheld that I've ever seen or used. I made a whole video about using this as part of an ultralight backpacking setup. It really doesn't get more small and light than this. And now we come to one of my all-time favorite handhelds, definitely in my top 3 right now. This is the AYANEO DMG. It's basically the most high-end, super ultra premium Game Boy that you could ever get. It has a Snapdragon G3X Gen 2, so it can handle everything. Everything you can do on Android. GameCube, PS2, 3DS, even Switch. It has a freaking beautiful high-resolution OLED screen. It has all the conveniences of Android, so an amazing sleep mode, and you can install any front end you want. I like ESDE as my front end. I use this all the freaking time. Every single day, I play this in bed. This is actually the main handheld that I use to record gameplay for my videos. I'm nuts about the original Game Boy. That's the aesthetic that I look for in my handhelds, as you've probably noticed. And this is the most high-end Game Boy that has come along. It's got a few minor quirks. Some people don't like it that much, but for me, I love this thing to bits. This thick boy is the Cube XX, which has a square screen, so I call it the SQUAZIZZLE. I think every serious retro doodad enthusiast should have a square ratio device, because there are lots of systems that can really benefit from square screens. Game Boy and Game Boy Color, obviously, but also vertical shoot-em-ups, so you don't have to turn your doodad on the side. 8:7 ratio systems are great, like NES and Super Nintendo, and Pico 8. This thing is hands down my favorite device to play Pico 8 games, and I am nuts about Pico 8 games. It's super comfy, it has all the retro vibes, the controls are amazing. It has a rolling D-pad style D-pad, which isn't very common on retro doodads, and I love that here. It's my favorite square handheld. I love it almost as much as the dark cube in my basement that sucks all the joy and light from my life. Yet somehow the more it hurts me, the more I love it and want to please it by bringing it gifts like sharp things and things that bleed. There are lots of types of handhelds. Some go for retro vibes and some try to be more modern. Some are just weird. But the ones that I find most interesting are the ones that attempt to capture the look and feel of actual old retro things. The GKD Bubble does this. It's the most perfect modern updated Game Gear that you could ever want. It captures all the Game Gear nostalgia through the look and the feel of the device, everything from the shape to the aesthetics to the style of the D-pad and buttons, but it's tighter and more modern than the original Game Gear, which is good. And we also get all the conveniences of modern emulation here, and we get a decent emulation station-based operating system, and it plays a ton of stuff. And they even managed to get dual analog sticks on this thing. But my favorite thing to do with these hyper-specific doodads is turn them into dedicated machines for a single system. And this one is my Game Gear thing. That's all I want to play on it, and I do. And it's fun as heck. When the TRIMUI Smart Pro hit the scene, it was disruptive. This thing is so good for the price that it more or less set a new standard for price to performance for budget handhelds. It's under $100 and it can play everything up to, you guessed it, Dreamcast and N64 and PS1 and PSP. But what sets this thing apart is the amazing, super high quality hardware. It feels like a more expensive premium device than it has any right to, considering the price. It's a big, beautiful 5-inch LCD screen and a super high quality build, amazing controls, great system, and you can even install custom operating systems on here. You can go with Newly, that's what I did. I love that stuff like this exists at this price. Not necessarily because I think everyone should buy a TRIMUI Smart Pro, but because it forces other doodad makers to price their stuff to be competitive with this thing. And more often than not, the TRIMUI Smart Pro just comes out on top. I know lots of people love this thing, and for good reason, because it's good, obviously. When the RG405V came along, it was baffling to me that anyone would design a console like that. It is so chunky and weird. However, when I actually started using it, I changed my mind. It was super comfortable. However, it had problems. The chipset was older and couldn't handle lots of really high-end stuff. The screen was kind of meh. And also the thumbstick sucked. Amberlick listened to all this feedback and gave us a new updated version that fixed all the problems of the old one. It was the same size and shape, but now we have an awesome high-resolution 4-inch screen, great thumbsticks that I really love using, and now we have enough horsepower to run a ton of stuff. Everything up to and including PSP and Dreamcast and most GameCube and PS2, and even a good amount of 3DS and Switch. Until the AYANEO DMG came along, this was the best vertical handheld, but considering the price of the DMG, if you want a powerful vertical handheld but you don't want to have to take out a second mortgage on your apartment to get it, then the 406V is still probably the best choice for most people. And now we come to the MIYOO Mini. What can I say about this thing that I haven't said 1,000 times before? I guess I could say I wish the MIYOO Mini was a human girl so I could marry it and have kids. I haven't said that before. I probably shouldn't have said that now that I think about it. I am so into the MIYOO Mini. If you watch my channel, you know that this is not only my favorite retro handheld, it is my favorite thing in the world, apart from my mom. But she doesn't like it when I call her a thing, so I'll just say it's still the MIYOO Mini. It is so small and light and portable that it lives in my pocket. I always have this with me, all day, every day. But it's still big enough to be super comfortable and enjoyable to game on. The screen is beautiful and it has amazing scaling options for all the retro systems. It's powerful enough to handle up to PS1. It has a decent stock system and an amazing custom operating system called Onion OS. That's what I use. It's my forever device. I intend on having this with me until the day I die. And unless something comes along and replaces it, which I would be fine with, but it hasn't happened yet, so until then, the MIYOO Mini holds the keys to my heart. But lots of people find the MIYOO Mini a bit too small and a bit too cramped and maybe too limited in what it can do. And for those people, there is another option. Not playing video games, going outside and enjoying all the variety that life has to offer. But if you're not into that, then maybe you'll be into the MIYOO Mini Plus instead. This thing is the bigger brother to the MIYOO Mini. It has the same super retro vibes, the same general look and feel, but it's bigger and more comfortable. It has the same chip as the MIYOO Mini and it can use the same software. Plus, we also get Wi-Fi here, so you can do retro achievements. Bigger screen, obviously, so the games are easier to see. I love the original MIYOO Mini, but I got to admit that it's going to be too small for lots of people. That's why the MIYOO Mini Plus is the handheld that I end up recommending the most. The AYANEO EVO is my highest end retro handheld. I have higher end handheld PCs, but retro handhelds are a different thing. And the AYANEO is the top dog of all of them. And it's also the most expensive of them. This thing is not cheap, and it does a ton of stuff, and it's so good in so many ways, but there are cheaper handhelds like the ODIN 2 Portal that are nearly just as good at almost half the price. However, if you are looking for the highest high-end device that you can get, something with the most power, the biggest battery, then this is the one. It has a huge, beautiful 7-inch OLED screen with a crazy 165 Hz refresh rate. It's super neat looking. I love the retro vibes of this retro power version, but I also love the base models too. But the thing that keeps me picking this up all the time is that it's just so nice to use. It's super big and comfy to hold with the best thumbsticks that I've ever used on a handheld. And the problem is that it's just way more handheld than most people need. But maybe you fancy yourself a retro doodad enthusiast and you want the best that you can get and you don't mind paying for the privilege. So yeah, this is the one you want then. At the complete opposite end of the spectrum is the cheapest handheld that I'm going to show you today. This, dweebs and lady dweebs, is the DATAFROG SF2000. To be clear, this is a low-end handheld. Do not expect much, but it's super cheap, so that's kind of to be expected. There are 3 reasons I love the DATAFROG. One is that it offers solid performance for the price. At this price, which you can find this for like 20 bucks on AliExpress. I'll try to find a link for you and put it below. Usually for that price, you just get those cheap Famiclone things that come with 500 games or whatever. No extra systems or save states or none of the emulation goodness that you want. But here you get NES and Game Boy Color. Sega Genesis is amazing on here, and also a good amount of Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance for 20 bucks. Also, it's a really nice actual handheld. It's got a nice look to it, retro vibes, it's got good controls, and it's super comfy. Also, you can get it bundled with a controller, and the controller is great, and you can plug it into an old TV, so you get like a home console out of the same thing. For this price, that is nuts. If you only want to spend 20 or 30 bucks on a handheld, this is the one to get. I mean, spend more if you want something great, but this is as cheap as a burger and fries and a shake for you and your sweetie. And she'll probably dump you tomorrow anyways. The DATAFROG won't ever leave you. Ever. Speaking of cheap handhelds, this is the R36H, and this is more or less the best choice if you want to spend the least amount of money but still get something that does more or less the same stuff as the mid-range devices. You can find this for under 40 bucks, and it punches way above its weight. It has the RK3326 chipset, which isn't a beast, but at this price, that'll give you a ton of stuff. Everything up to PS1 with a good amount of N64 and Nintendo DS and Dreamcast and PSP. I mean, you won't get as much as the higher end doodads, but still, that's some good emulation options for this price. And also, the system on here is great. It comes with ArcOS out of the box, which is an amazing open source operating system. There are some downsides to this thing, and the controls aren't as good as higher end doodads, and there's some missing features like video out. But if you're just looking for a cheap device to play retro games on, and you want something that sort of feels like a more expensive device, this is an amazing choice. It even comes in orange, which is the best color. I think if you took a bunch of retro emulation enthusiasts and you locked them in a room and you asked them which mid-range retro handheld they'd recommend, I bet they'd say, "Why are you locking us in this room? Let us out of here." And then you'd say, "Not until you answer the question." And they'd all probably say, the Retroid Pocket 5. This thing is just, everyone loves it. It's a crowd pleaser. It's so good, it plays so much, it's so high quality, and the price that you pay for it is honestly baffling. This thing blows away the competition at this price point. The RP5 and also the RP Mini, depending on which size you prefer. You won't find retro doodads for $200-ish that do what these things can do and have as enjoyable of an experience. The ergonomics are super comfy, the screens are OLED and beautiful, and they're not top-end performance, but they're close to it. They still do a ton. Most GameCube and PS2 is no problem, and a surprising amount of Switch is great on here. Because they use a Snapdragon 865, that means that we get great driver support, so compatibility is about as good as it gets. I mean, it's hard to argue with the Retroid products, and I could say the RP5 is also one of my top devices. Definitely in the top 5. I should make a video about that someday. Oh wait, I did. Amberlick's answer to the Retroid products is their newest high-end device, the RG406H. This thing uses the same processor as the 406V, same sticks, same software, but here we get it in a horizontal form factor, and there's a lot they got right here. We get super comfy ergonomics that honestly, I like better even than the Retroids. We get a high pixel density 4-inch screen. It's not OLED, but it's still super crisp and lovely, and it's 4:3 ratio, which many retro gamers prefer. And the Retroid Mini has some problems that this doesn't have, so I can still see this being a great choice for 4:3 retro doodad lovers who want something high-end. This thing doesn't get talked about much, and I haven't even made a video on it, and I don't even know if I will, but maybe that's biased of me. I think it's because we just don't find it interesting, but it's still just, it's a freaking awesome doodad, and we're all kind of doing it a disservice by ignoring it because it's so good in so many ways. I really should make a video about this one. I probably will. Maybe. When I got a GBA back in the day, it was the GBA SP. That's where I jumped on the GBA bandwagon, but I think most gamers that grew up playing GBA originally got it with the original GBA, the horizontal one, the chunky boy. And like I said earlier, I love me a doodad that feels like a real retro thing. So obviously when the RG34XX came along, I had to get this in my life. I call it the THICCBIZZLE, by the way. Even though I didn't own an original GBA, I still have respect and nostalgia for the system, and also, GBA is my favorite retro system. I love the GBA library because those games are the pinnacle of pixel-based retro games, from an era when game designers had mastered what they could do on 32-bit hardware, but with more modern game design sensibilities. The GBA library is huge. It's full of bangers and hidden gems, and the THICCBIZZLE is hands down the most authentic way to play GBA games. Not just because it looks and feels nearly identical to the original GBA, but also because we get pixel-perfect 3x GBA integer scaling. If you love GBA and you want the best way to play them, I can't think of a better doodad than the THICCBIZZLE. Maybe it's just because I'm me, but I'm a big fan of the underdogs, the diamonds in the rough, those devices that are a little janky from companies that don't have the best track record, but ones that have it where it counts. The ones that do great stuff even though they're rough around the edges. The XU Mini M is one of those things. Lots of the reviews were not positive about this, and honestly I can't fault them because most of their criticisms are valid. But even though there are some things that it gets wrong, in my opinion those things are insignificant in the face of what it gets right. It is a lovely little thing. I like the hand feel, great screen, wonderful controls, and a decent system that is a little bit janky and limited out of the box, but with a quick flash of Plum OS, it can become a wonderful operating system. You get a ton of stuff here for the price, up to PS1 and a bunch of N64, Dreamcast, and PSP, and it's just a cute little pocket-friendly thing, which you know is my jam. Watch my review before buying it because I want you to know what you're getting, but the short version is that I love it and I think it's great for the price, as long as you don't mind doing a little bit of tinkering. However, of all the budget retro doodads on this list, there is one that I think rises above the rest, like a god amongst mortals. I am nuts about the TRIMUI brick. This thing is among my favorites right now. It is so good in so many ways, and it is super popular. Everyone loves this thing for good reason. It is small, but not mini. It's smaller than the medium things, but bigger than the small things, so it's sort of the middle ground in terms of size. It's got a great build, feels premium, beautiful design, and it's aesthetic as heck. Great controls, good stock operating system, or you can install newly, which is of course what I did. And the best part about this thing is the screen. It's so sharp and crisp. I love the scaling options and just how good the games look. And I honestly wish more doodads would use this exact screen. It's so good. And it's breaking down prejudices. Most people think that it's bad to be a brick, but the TRIMUI brick is flying the brick flag proud. Power to you, brother. And that's it. That's what I have for you today. 20 quick-fire reviews. Make sure you check out the full videos linked below if you want to learn more about this stuff. And like I said, I have links below for everything if you want to pick any of it up for yourselves. I couldn't review all my doodads, obviously, and there were quite a few that didn't make this list that I wish I could have squeezed in. So I'll leave that up to you. Why don't you give us your mini reviews for your favorite doodads in the comments below? And while you're down there, you might as well click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or don't if you didn't. That's it from me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.